Now, our next speaker has been with JIC for more than 6 years. He, along with his team, create long-term values for JIC from customers, markets, and relationships. He is also the executive assistant to the managing director, which has a broad variety of administrative tasks to facilitate the MD's ability to effectively lead the organization, including assisting with special projects, designing and producing complex documents, reports and presentations, collecting and preparing information for meetings with staff and outside parties. Here to talk about the best practices in the service industry, please welcome Mr. Jotham Thommy.
Hi, greetings from United Arab Emirates and good afternoon to everyone. I am Jotham Thommy, the shareholder and executive assistant to the managing director of Al-Jazeera International Catering, commonly known as JIC. And to begin this presentation, I would like to first say Al-Jazeera International Catering is an award-winning, professionally managed catering and hospitality service provider, and we are based in Abu Dhabi in UAE. It is our pleasure and honor to present our best practices to this wonderful forum and also be part of the summit. To begin, can we move to the next slide, please? I can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so now the objective of today's presentation will be covering three core aspects. Can we move to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Keep going, keep going. Perfect. All right, so what we're going to be covering is starting with JIC's view of benchmarking and its relationship towards innovation and organization culture. Next, please. The second point is our commitment and practices towards benchmarking. Next point, please. And the third is share some of our best practices which we have implemented in our fight against COVID-19. We have a video for you so that we have created a brief video explaining our benchmarking approach, and followed by which we have details of our best practices implemented for COVID-19. So can you please play the video? Can you go next or play the video, please? Press play. I think you missed the video on the presentation. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Once you got the video working, you can put it on. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. Yeah, once you get the video working, we can show it at the end of the video. All right. Okay, moving forward, we will share our best practices against our fight against COVID. So, can you go to the next slide, please? So one of the key challenges in aspects of controlling and safeguarding the health of our stakeholder was quite enormous. So we started with 500 employees, moved to managing disinfection of 40,000 square feet, and health and safety of 15,000 plus customers whose only source of food and accommodation was in our facility, and also food security of 45,000 meals a day on a daily basis. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So, as the saying goes, be the change you wish to be and see in the world. So we spearled the change among our stakeholders, and we created a 3P strategy, which has people, process, people, and product. Can we go next, please? So on the process front, we first created a detailed pandemic response plan for our stakeholders to comply with. Second is we, based on which we detail the camp requirements and management plan for our pandemic management. The next is the organization risk matrix was reviewed and revised accordingly. After that, this assisted us in an easy identification of a person affected by COVID 19. All the identified personnel were isolated in the in house quarantine facility as guided by the MOH, and we utilized 20% of the whole accommodation facility for the purpose of isolation and quarantine. As part of the risk assessment, we identified potential stock shortage of disinfection materials and ensured a minimum past stock maintenance to maintain the disinfection program. Okay, next please. Yeah, the thermal screening facility was installed to monitor the temperature and movement of customers and staffs. Now, social distancing norms were also implemented and effected immediately. Next, please. Okay. The next we go to is people. Um, on the people front, our first step was to create awareness among all our stakeholders. Second, we went to awareness regarding the virus, its effects, and required protocols for adhering was given through toolbox talks, daily e-posters, distribution through WhatsApp, signage displays. People were educated and empowered to identify and report personal exhibiting symptoms, any violation of PP protocols, violation of social distancing norms, and violation of disinfection guidelines. Next thing is we also identify symptoms of employees and customers was monitored on a daily basis. Employee lockdown protocols were put in place in aspects of social gatherings, traveling, and staying outside the camps were restricted without prior approval. Vehicle disinfect Vehicle disinfection programs were also implemented, and passenger traveling capacity was reduced to 30% of the vehicle capacity. That's on the next slide. Yeah, perfect. And if you go to the next slide, with all these restrictions and protocols in place, we did understand that the welfare and emotional requirements of our staff have priorities, and hence our HR department ensured to continue our monthly welfare activities and use online platforms for engaging our staffs. Now, the next thing we look at is product. Now, it is our commitment to provide safe food and service every time and everywhere we serve. So, what we did was, in order to ensure safety and security of our staffs and customers, additional PPE protocols such as hazmat suits, gloves, masks were incorporated in for our frontline staff. If you go to the next slide, you'll see sanitization tunnels, sterilization cabinets were introduced for employees and equipment. The next is supply chain interruption was anticipated, and food stock planning was done well in advance to manage 30 days without any incoming stock requirements. As you can see now, the dining services also was stopped, and food delivery was done in disposable packets and containers. The next is the food delivery was also done through delivery station and strict monitoring. Next, in the laundry, washing programs were revised in aspects of chemical programming, and washing temperatures we managed to ensure disinfection to the maximum. Frequency of disinfection in the guest rooms were increased to 2 times a day. Last but not at least, we also wanted to ensure that we continue to seek valuable feedback from our customers and employees and enable a contactless feedback survey platform. Now, our customers can also scan the QR code and directly give their feedback online from the comfort of their rooms. Now, the results of what our practices had was an overall view of our performance in the fight against COVID. As you can see, there was 1,117 total number of screening performed, 99.97 infection control rate, and 6 total number of screening camps, and 0.03% total infection rate. Can you go next, please? As you can see, when we analyze month-wise of our quarantine manpower lost hours, we managed to do a comparison of all the months from April till September, because that is when we collected the information for your view. And go next, please. And this was the staff quarantine cost impact for us. Okay, next. Again, this is one of the main things what we wanted to bring to your attention is planning ahead. So we also gave it a particular target for the impact reduction, and this is what we came up from Jan to September, starting mostly from May onwards. Okay, next. Okay, so this now brings us to the end of our presentation, and we hope you get a glimpse of a 3P strategy. We would like to share some before and after pictures before your reference. This is what we did for catering services before when we had gatherings, and now what we have in packaged containers. Go next, please. This is what we did for our staff welfare before of again gatherings. We secluded it to keeping social distancing as well as online platforms. Next, please. Again, team meetings before when we had sessions like coffee with MD and management review meetings and different team meetings, department meetings. The use of Zoom and Microsoft Teams were widely used by us. And as you can see, we've been having team meetings regularly through Microsoft Teams. Next, please. And as you can see, facility services, we focus mostly on the protocols of COVID by disinfecting and keeping it clean and sanitized and monitoring of temperatures and people. As you can see, the before and after pictures. You can go next, please. So we welcome all of you to reach us directly for any clarifications, any queries you may have, and we will be very glad to assist you further. I would like to ask the presenter to show the video what you missed out in the beginning for our audience, please.
Mr. Thommy, unfortunately, we cannot play your video. Our material isn't currently compatible.
Okay. Fine. Thank you very much, everyone. And again, if you have any queries, you can feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you.
And our apologies to you, Mr. Thommy. We now, however, open the floor for a short Q&A session. Remember to please submit your questions to Slido using the code 45616. And our first question for Mr. Thommy: how do you sustain best practices amidst the global pandemic challenges?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Well, once again, Mr. Thommy, how do you sustain best practices in the current climate amidst the global pandemic challenges?
Continuous perseverance and dedication to all the practices and all the processes that we put in place. Because saying it is one way of doing it, but doing it is another. And like the saying, prevention is better than cure. So we need to make sure that all what we put in paper should be also practiced diligently.
I see, that's very interesting. Our second question is, please stand by as our question comes in from our participants. Once again, a little bit later, we will be having more takeaways from our next speaker, so please stand by as our conference continues. We are currently collating questions from our listeners. Once again, please submit your questions to Slido using the code 45616. We have another question from one of our participants. What are the parameters to maintain the status quo for maintaining best practices in the service industry?
Okay, the parameters that we put in place for our 3P process was based on different processes that we set up for the content for the plan that we had in place for the COVID. And one of the key things is the people. I wouldn't say by controlling the people you'll have results, because not everyone is perfect. But what we need to strive for is making sure that the mindset is clear with everyone. Once you have everyone on board, it becomes easier for maintaining parameters that you've already put in place. And if there's a detailed process, chances of expected results and anticipated results will always be close to 100%.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that concludes our Q&A. Once again, thank you, Mr. Thommy.